Buttonwood Park is one of the most beautiful spots in New Bedford. It's also one of the most historic. Here to talk with us about the park and an upcoming fundraiser is Richard Leary, president of the Friends of Buttonwood Park. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, Casey.
Hello. I know I'm not Jim, but I'll do my best. First, let's talk about the fundraiser, Coffee in the Dell. It's scheduled for June 10th. You can tell us all about it.
Okay, well, first off, I don't believe it's a fundraiser. I think it's just an event that we're putting on for the general public to come and enjoy the park, meet the friends, gives us a chance to meet them. We provide refreshments, coffee and donuts. I would advise
Donuts, I'm in.
I would advise people to come early in case supplies run out. But the Coffee in the Dell, which will occur just west of the greenhouse in the park, kind of in the center of the park near the Senior Citizen Center. It will be just west of the greenhouse, across from the pond, 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock on June 10th. The rain date is June 24th. We'll have some tables set up, tables and chairs. We'll have the refreshments. And in addition, we'll have papers on the tables. People can come in and read the Sunday papers. And also we'll be giving tours of the Arboretum. The Arboretum is an area of the park where over the last, I would say, 30 years or so, we've been planting some special trees. An arboretum is a botanical
Almost like a
tree
garden?
collection. Almost like a garden, but a garden of trees. And one of our members, Frank Farrell, will be giving tours of the Arboretum. He gives a very good tour. I think it's very enjoyable for anyone who takes the tour. So just a very nice morning. Hopefully it's a nice morning. The rain date will be June 24th, but hopefully June 10th will be a great day. And as I say, from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock, that's when it will be occurring.
So do you want people to sign up ahead of time, or is it kind of just show up day of, enjoy the time, very laid-back atmosphere?
People can just show up, but we would really appreciate it if they let us know beforehand, and they could simply send an email to our email address, which is friends@buttonwoodpark, all one word, .org. friends@buttonwoodpark.org. Just let us know if you're coming, and that will help us to better prepare for the event.
Tell us about the Friends group. What do you do, and what is your mission?
Okay, well, about, I'd say, 30 years ago, the late 1980s, the state of Massachusetts identified 10 parks in Massachusetts as Olmsted parks, parks that were either designed by or strongly influenced by the famous landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted. He designed Central Park, the Fens in Boston. He designed parks throughout America, the Capitol grounds, and he designed at least 10 parks in Massachusetts. But the state of Massachusetts identified 10 to receive funds, millions of dollars, for the restoration and renewal of these parks. And these parks had, over time, fallen into kind of like neglect, general disrepair, lack of maintenance, and Buttonwood Park was one of those. And we received the first year $1 million. And with that $1 million, we kind of reconfigured the park so that it was more accessible to people, it was more open. It better fulfilled its mission as a place where people could come for, one, active recreation, sports, tennis, baseball, football, and also passive recreation, where people just want to come into the park, get away from it all, relax by themselves or with their friends or family, and have a good time. So anyway, and unfortunately, after the first year, statewide, the Massachusetts economy kind of went belly up, and we never received any more funding from the state for work in Buttonwood Park. So since that time, and at that time, for each one of these parks, a Friends group was established, all volunteer nonprofit groups that would act as stewards of these restoration and renewal programs. And for each park, a master plan was developed, and that master plan was developed by a citizens advisory committee that comprised stakeholders, representatives from every group that used the park. Baseball players, football players, tree huggers, gardeners, the city government, representatives of the mayor's office, the city council, the ward councilors. It was a pretty representative group of people who met for a couple of years with landscape architects and landscape historians. It was really a very sophisticated kind of approach, very professional approach, but which involved from the outset the people of New Bedford and their representatives. So the master plan really reflected the wishes of the people as best as you can satisfy everybody. You can never satisfy everybody, but I think the plan that came out was a really good plan. So the Friends of Buttonwood Park was established to oversee this implementation of this plan, initially and over time. And we've existed since then, for the last 30, going on 30 years now, as a nonprofit group. And that's what we do. We function to protect the park. Because if you don't have a friends group, you don't have master plans and things like that, all of a sudden you get all kinds of things coming in the park that tend to commercialize it and really kind of ruin it. So we try to protect it. We also help maintain it. I mean, the city, the DPI Department of Public Infrastructure does a fantastic job maintaining not only Buttonwood Park, but the parks throughout the city. And it's a real challenge for them because they don't have as much money as they would like, as much money as is needed to do all the work that needs to be done. And that's where the Friend steps in and helps, because we
fill in the gap, really.
Fill in the gap, get volunteers to come in, do different things, raise money for things that otherwise, wouldn't happen. 3 years ago, we built two high school and one college-size basketball court. Absolutely beautiful. Buttonwood Park is the most heavily used park in the city as far as recreation is concerned, and basketball is included. So we put brand new state-of-the-art courts with lighting in there, and that was about $150,000 all told. That was a big effort. We've planted 300 trees since in the last 30 years. We've planted gardens. We've cleared the woodlands of vines partially. I mean, that's a huge job. So that's another thing that we're working on. Put in speed bumps. Worked with the zoo. Collaborated on different things. The Zoological Society. So all kinds of stuff. That's what we've been doing. But basically, protecting, maintaining, and improving the park.
So you touched on a lot of this, but there's a wide variety of activities offered at Buttonwood, from animals at the zoo to baseball and softball fields to the very basketball courts you mentioned and tennis courts and, of course, the pond. Is this what Frederick Law Olmsted envisioned when this was all created?
Yeah, and first I'd point out that there are really two nonprofit organizations in the park. There's the Zoological Society, and they basically, do the zoo. Mm-hmm. And then there's the Friends of Buttonwood Park, and I like to describe it as they do everything inside the zoo, inside the zoo perimeter, and we do everything outside, the public park proper. Mm-hmm. As far as the vision of Frederick Law Olmsted is concerned, he wanted a park, a gathering place. It was a very democratic kind of egalitarian kind of a concept. He wanted a place where people could kind of like escape from the city. And at that time, the late 1800s, early 1900s, and I think he died around 1900, but his son and sons carried on that tradition and people who he influenced. But at that time, like he was working in New York City to develop Central Park. New York was a horrible place to live, especially if you were a poor person. It was dirty, it was unhealthy, and a public park, and Olmsted called public parks the lungs of the city. It's like if you established a big green space, for example, Central Park, you could get away from the tenements and all the nasty conditions, the bad air, the noise, and escape for a little while into a public park. And so that was kind of like his vision. And he envisioned it, he was perhaps a little more so inclined towards the passive rather than the active. But over time, people have realized that, there's a need for both. And there needs to be a balance between both. The ball fields and active recreation, and people who just want to go in the park and sit under a tree and sleep or just relax or have a picnic. And to that extent, I think Buttonwood Park, and predating the park, was the zoo. Before we had a park in New Bedford, before the Olmsted firm was hired to design the park, there already was kind of like a little zoo. So historically, that's always been there. People have always loved that, and that's not going to disappear, and we love that. We're going to keep it. But there's also the other side too, the games and recreation and passive stuff, and I think collectively, us, the Zoological Society, the city, we've worked hard to achieve a balance that you don't find in all parks in New Bedford. Brookline Park is an example where perhaps the active recreation is really unbalanced or dominated passive recreation, although I think they're trying to change that. But in Buttonwood, yeah, I think it's achieved that balance between the active and the passive, and it's really an enjoyable place for the citizens of New Bedford, and we hope to keep it that way. And I would just say this, though. Groups like ours, we're the only one of the 10 friends groups that were established back in the late 1980s when the state was funding all this stuff. We're the only one that still exists.
Wow.
And we're an older organization. Our board is not comprised of teenagers or the millennials. We tend to be a little older. So we're really, one of our big challenges right now is to bring, new blood and young people into the organization as volunteers, but as important, if not more so, as members of the board who are committed, to our idea of, the kind of a park that's not over-commercialized, that has a balance between the active and the passive.
Just trying to preserve what's there now and make it better,
yeah.
Enhance it.
And that's one of our big challenges, and hopefully we don't go out of existence, but that's a real possibility. As with other organizations, either the citizens step up or it doesn't happen.
You're listening to Townsquare Sunday on WBSM. I'm Casey Sylvia, and my guest is Richard Leary, president of the Friends of Buttonwood Park. Now, are you a big fan of the swan boats? Because that's really one of the newest things that have been added to the park.
Yeah, I am. We have pictures that show people swimming in the park, probably most recently in the 1940s. I'm not sure. Right now, the pond is not that welcoming to swimmers. It's kind of a dirty pond, okay? Mm-hmm. Different kinds of pollutants and things like that. But yeah, but that doesn't affect people who use the swan boats. It's the kind of thing where you probably don't want to go swimming in there, but it's a beautiful pond. It looks beautiful. And the swan boats are a really neat activity, and people who bring their family there or their kids and go on the swan boats. It's really cool.
I've seen all ages on those things. I'm there at Buttonwood probably every other day, walking my nephew and with my sister, and it's so nice seeing all generations coming together and being able to use those swan boats.
It's really nice. When I was a kid, they had the fishing derby every Saturday in the summertime, and that was a huge affair. They had some older men who would run it, and they'd give prizes for the biggest fish, the most fish, all kinds of stuff like that. And there were tons of kids who did this every Saturday. So the pond was not only a beautiful, you drive by it sometimes, and it's just a beautiful thing to look at. Although one of the big challenges for the city of New Bedford, for the Friends, and more so for the city, the pond is continually being filled in by material. It's just, weeds and things like that. It's continually shrinking the pond. And if it continues without any dredging activity or removal activity, that pond will be gone, maybe 50, 75 years. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But year by year,
slowly but surely,
that pond is filling in. And, we're hoping and working with other people, but mainly it's the state and the federal government, if they've had any funds, that's going to either do the necessary dredging of the pond, or we're just going to sit back and unfortunately see this thing continually filled in. But the swan boats, yeah, I'm all for it. We're all for it. It's a great activity.
I have yet to try them, but I'm definitely going to make it at some point this summer. I'll take my nephew. So where can people go to get more information about Coffee in the Dell, the event that you have coming up?
Well, like I say, basically it's Sunday, June 10th, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., rain date June 24th. If you're planning to go, please let us know by sending us an email, friends@buttonwoodpark.org. Just tell me how many people who will be coming in your group. And that's basically it. We have a website, www.buttonwoodpark.org. We also have a Facebook page. I'm not sure if this information has been posted up yet, But that's basically it, June 10th, and email us at friends@buttonwoodpark.org.
Well, it sounds like a fabulous event, and I know it's not a fundraiser as we originally thought, but just getting the community together and just enjoying the park, I think it's an awesome idea.
Yeah.
So Richard Leary, thanks for coming in, and good luck with Coffee in the Dell, and we hope to be hearing more from you, and hopefully we can get some young blood in your organization.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks very much.
Thank you.